Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new video. Today I'm going to be talking about cards I would love to see for the next anniversary set. And what I mean by this is I'm thinking that the next anniversary set for the 30th anniversary will likely follow a similar pattern to the 25th anniversary celebration set. And Celebrations, may I say, is one of the best sets of all time. You have a lot of modern collectors who are only in it for the money who dislike the set because it doesn't solely appeal to collectors, and the fact that cards are easy to pull, which means there wasn't that much value in the set. But ultimately, that's exactly what the set should be. It's a way to reprint old cards, celebrate the game, and not celebrate the past 2 years of people price gouging everything to, make a quick buck. I'm here to go over about 60 or so cards that I would like to see in the next set, describe why they should be in here. I'm going to go over each relatively quickly, except for some obvious ones that I want to talk about a little bit more. So my rules for this is obviously, if it was in Celebrations prior, I will not be choosing it as a card that should be represented. As a player, I'd obviously want to put cards that represent players exclusively, but as a collector, I realize that this, as someone who's also has to appeal to collectors, they have to do that with the set, and so unfortunately, it ends up a little bit diluted. Really, Celebrations was a near-perfect set. There's some, questionable choices. Donphan Prime, maybe not the best one. Reshiram and Zekrom, you really only need one of those. And, everyone agrees that Imposter Oak's Revenge is definitely, the what-the-hell card of the set, because not only was it, not played very much, but also nobody wants it, because it's not a collectible card either. So, a few different things. So I kind of just wanted to focus on cards that were not in the other Celebrations, and cards that appeal to both players and collectors, though I am very heavily biased towards playability, because obviously when we're talking about history of the game, collectability almost doesn't matter in a way. You have a few cards that are obviously notable, like Charizard, and exclusive rare prints. Obviously some of them are Japanese exclusive, so we can't put them on here, but yeah. Anyway, we're going to get right into it. Starting off with the first card here, we have Hitmonchan from base set. Now, really, you could throw Electabuzz or Hitmonchan. I figure Hitmonchan's the more iconic part of the combo, considering, Scyther was printed the very next set combo, or to counter Hitmonchan being the strongest card. 1 for 20 was just ridiculous at this time, so it was playable in the iconic Haymaker decks. Really, the best single Pokemon from base set. And it's just, one of the most iconic cards of all time in decks, and realistically, if we're going to be featuring Gen 1 cards that aren't Rocket Zapdos or, the Gen 1 starters, you want to go for, these early playable cards like this. You could easily put Scyther or Electabuzz here. I just think Hitmonchan is the most iconic part. Then, also from base set, this is one I'd like to see, is Item Finder. So you're going to see that I actually put quite a few different staple cards in here that are getting to be a bit much. And as you can see on the prices here on the side, this card is not cheap. They're about $8 a piece for a mod play copy, because it is the best single trainer card from base set. You can argue Oak, and you can argue Computer Search as well. I think Item Finder is the single best card from base set, because it's a 4 of in every single deck, because it's super, super good. SCR and Energy Removal, both those are obviously up there too. Really an iconic card, and really a card that, reprinting this with Celebrations, it helps players get these cards. Ultimately, Celebrations should not just be a collector fest, reprinting all these sweaty cards that people want to jack up in value. It should be celebrating the players, and collectors should be second to it. So we should see cards like this that help people build these old formats. Then we have Mewtwo, the promo Mewtwo. I chose this one because I much prefer the artwork to the just stock artwork we see on the other card. This is one of the best cards. When this came out, it was instantly a hit in so many decks. It's also one that would appeal to collectors. I think a Hollow Mewtwo would be a card that people would like to go after, so I'd really like to see this card. This is definitely, if I were to pick one from Gen 1, it'd be Item Finder, but this is definitely my second choice. We then have Brock's Ninetales. The gym sets are really difficult to work with, Gym and Rocket, because a lot of the cards that were good from these sets are not very collectible in any way, like Erica's Jigglypuff and the hand disruption cards that people would not like. I'm not saying you can't reprint the hand disruption cards, that would be fine choices, the Rocket's Sneak Attack and something like Team Rocket's Trigger or something like that. Either way, I think it's the Rocket's Trap. there's like 2 different hand disruption cards. This is like one of the few actual Pokemon from the gym sets. It's basically this and like Rocket Zapdos. Those are like the only 2 Pokemon that were like legitimately great. And this card was great because it could turn into any stage, or turn like any evolution Pokemon, and it was immune to energy removal because of the Brock's trainer card that you could attach to it. So it gave it a niche in that regard. So if you're going to reprint any Pokemon from the gym sets, I know they went a little hard in the first Gen 1 for celebrations, reprinting like, you know, we had Dark Gyarados from Rockets, and then we had Rocket Zapdos, and you had, you know, Charizard, Venusaur, Blastoise, Imposter Oak. I still don't get that one. They've written really, really hard. There's like 7 Gen 1 cards in the original celebrations out of like 25, which is a bit much. This is one that if they're gonna, you know, force more Gen 1 Pokemon in here, gotta do this one. Then we move on to Gen 2. So you'll notice for Gen 2, I decided that if they're going to continue doing the starter trend, which I really hope they don't, honestly, like, the Charizard serves no purpose for me. I know it's a collectability thing, but like, it's not a good card. The Venusaur is just okay. The Blastoise is the only one that's like remotely playable, the original 3. I do think at least the Gen 2 starters fare better. However, they're a little bit more difficult too. So we have Feraligatr here, easily the best of the Gen 2 starters. Was a top tier deck at the time. If you're going to print any single card from Gen 2 in the, you know, Celebrations V2, it'd be this. We have Cleffa now. Cleffa was the most important card to print in Celebrations. Now we need Feraligatr if we're going to print like a single attacker. We then have Typhlosion. You'll notice I mixed and matched a little bit. There is the Meganium and the Feraligatr from the same set in Japan. And there's a Typhlosion that is also from that premium file. I'll bring that up real quick. Yeah, it is this one. But this Typhlosion is significantly worse. And as a player, I'd like them to focus on cards that are more playable. This Typhlosion was okay back in the day from what I've seen. Weird space right there, huh? So if they're going to print a Typhlosion, I'd want to do this. And then we have Meganium. So Meganium was good in the Skyridge format with Executor from that. So if they're going to do a starter trio, this is definitely the 3 I would pick from Gen 2. One of the things that worries me, though, especially in terms of like Feraligatr, which Feraligatr really should be reprinted in a Celebrations too, is that Japan doesn't like reprinting cards that are from like special limited products. We've seen this in the past, a lot of cards getting skipped in reprint sets like Hidden Fates, and you know, you'll see sets like that. They'll skip cards that are like released in like little like decks, or you know, Shining Fates, cards that were like printed in like the Venusaur VMAX deck or whatever weren't gonna get a shiny. You know, these cards that are like exclusive to different collections usually don't get reprint versions. That's what worries me, because the Feraligatr and this Meganium are both part of a premium file, which is essentially you got like an Ultra Pro page, like a 9-pocket Ultra Pro page with just cards put in it, which is really weird, but they used to do that a lot back in the day. But yeah, Feraligatr needs to be reprinted. I'd prefer they just abandon it. I do want the Meganium, but I could care less about the Typhlosion, honestly. But if they're going to keep doing the starter trend, these are good ones to go. Next is a card that definitely will not be printed, but I put Slowking from Neo Genesis. If you do not know, this is the 2nd card ever banned. It is mistranslated for its mind games, so instead of it being required to be active, it just works anywhere. So you can have up to 4 of these working at a time, and it was arguably the most broken card, possibly in the game's history. Literally broken, because it wasn't supposed to work like that. And that's why it probably won't be printed in Japan. This card just didn't really exist, because why would you play this card in Japan where the effect doesn't work like that? You wouldn't. So in Japan, it's pretty like unmentionable, you know, who cares? In America, obviously, though, it was like, you know, international release. Crazy card. I don't think they'll include it, though, just because it wasn't a thing in Japan. Then we have Sneasel. This was the first ever banned card right before Slowking, and it's for its ridiculous beat-up attack, which flips a coin for each of your Pokemon in play, and then does 20 for each heads. At the time, you had Special Darkness, so you're probably getting, like, if you have a full board, you're probably getting, like, 80 damage out of an attack, which, like, I showed you Hitmonchan a minute ago. The numbers didn't really go up in Gen 2, so it's, like, doing 80 for 2 energy when this was, like, 20 for 1 was already absurd. It was ridiculous. Free Retreat, 60 HP, great resistance to Mewtwo, no weakness. Like, this card was literally flawless. Too good. This card is one I could easily see being reprinted. It is probably the most iconic attacker of the entire Gen 2 era. It's not a card that's particularly expensive, so it's not one I want reprinted because it's like out of reach for players. So maybe ignore it just for that reason alone. Pick something that's a little bit more, you know, out of reach for players, like the Feraligatr Hollow, which is like a $100 card probably if I had to take a guess. Let's take a look-see here. Yeah, like $100 card. I was exactly on the money. But yeah, it's one of the most iconic Pokemon of all time. No really collector appeal here unless you love Sneasel. Then we have Shining Charizard. This one's purely collector. As we know, Charizard cards tend to be pretty dog. The attack is absolutely terrible. It's unpayable. And the art on it, frankly, I like Hironobu Yoshida. Like, they're a designer of lots of Pokemon, I think including Celebi. But I just really don't like this artwork. I don't like most of the shiny Pokemon, to be honest, because it's the way they like black it out. It doesn't look good even with the texturing, but if you're going to print an iconic Charizard card, here is one that you could print. And another collector pick here. If we're going to pick a collector card, we really got to go for crystal types this time. They were not represented in the original celebrations. And that's another thing I wanted to see is like the gimmicks that did not get represented, at least the notable gimmicks that did not get represented in the original celebrations, should probably get a spot. Crystal type Lugia is probably the most collectible of the crystal types just because that's very good artwork. Though there's also, I put Crystal Charizard because, you know, crystal types, Charizard, people want Charizard cards. Not a big fan of this Charizard because I don't like Charizard at all, but if we were to pick a crystal type that I would love for collector's purposes, as you all know, I'm a big Celebi fan, and Crystal Celebi is the best looking crystal Pokemon of them all. So that would be my pick, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And considering Celebi has very few playable cards in the history of the game, I guess I'm out of luck. Then we go on to the EX era. So one of the cards that has become recently pretty expensive is Delcatty. This is a staple card in 2004 and 2005, and even in a couple of 2007 decks with its reprinted version. For its energy draw, which allows you to discard a card from hand and draw 3. It was really like the first powerful draw engine Pokemon in the game. You know, we had like a Porygon 2 during like the E series that was like not amazing, and then this is like just leagues better than everything else up to this point. It was in like every 2004 deck besides the like Magma and Aqua and the Walrein deck. Like every single other deck's playing Delcatty Magneton engine. And it's like a $15 card a lot of times for a nice looking copy. So I think this would be a really good include. It's a good include for players, get that value down so it's more accessible to play 2004, which is quickly becoming one of the least accessible eras due to e-reader cards like this going up in value. Then we have Blaziken. This is one I might say that they're not going to include because if they do plan on doing this starter trend, like we've seen, if they continue on with Gen 2 starters and they decide to do a Celebrations 3 down the line, Blaziken would be a prime pick. It is probably the best attacker, if not second best attacker in 2004 format. Took second at the Worlds that year and is basically argued to be like the best deck up until the discovery of Gorebyss being the best deck years later. So just an incredible, iconic card of a popular Pokemon. I really don't think you can go wrong with Blaziken, other than the fact they might choose to disclude it because of the starter thing that I was talking about with, continuing the line if they do Celebrations 3. Then we have Blaziken EX. If you're going to pick an EX from the 2004 format, Rayquaza EX is a good option. Blaziken EX is better, though, in my opinion, as an option. And there's like some, maybe like Suicune EX that would have more collector appeal, but are also playable. So there's a few options to choose from, maybe Mewtwo EX. But Blaziken's probably the most iconic EX from 2004 if I had to pick a single one. So that's why I picked Blaziken here. Then we go on to 2005 era. Pidgeot was not included in the original Celebrations. It is arguably the best engine Pokemon ever printed, so much so that everything in the format really goes around countering it. So in 2005-2006, you see lots of things like Battle Frontiers thrown into decks. There's ability locking cards everywhere just to shut down Pidgeot, because Quick Search is that good. It's not one that's like super inaccessible, but I do think that it would be good to reprint it, because 3 years from now it might start to become inaccessible. Along those same lines, we have a much more inaccessible card, Jirachi from EX Deoxys. This is another stable card in 2005 and 2006, helping players set up their board with its Wishing Star Pokepower, a very iconic card from the era, and I think one that collectors would also like because it's a very, very cute artwork. And I do own one of these, I'm very happy to. This is one I could definitely see being reprinted. It's getting up there in value, and accessibility for these retro formats is very important. Can't fix everything, but it would be nice to fix some things. Looking more towards the 2006 era, we have Lugia EX. This was one of the most iconic EXs of the EX era, used in the LBS deck. Now you could just say Blastoise is just a better pick, because Blastoise is like the main star of this, but I think Lugia has a bit more collector appeal, being that it's Lugia. It's just a great card, and I would like to see Lugia. If we're going to pick like an EX from the EX era, we did really good the first time around, honestly. The first time we got EXs for celebrations, if we just want to bring... It might be helpful just to bring up the celebration set just to refresh everyone's memory. Let's X out of that, and then celebrations is right here. So Classic Collection. We got Mew EX and Gardevoir EX. Now Gardevoir EX is a little bit less iconic. It was more of a Japanese thing than... we didn't really have a format where this was super playable over here, but Mew EX is one of the most iconic picks. I did a good job there. At the very least, Lugia is definitely like probably like third or fourth most iconic EX of the EX era, so that would be a good pick. I love Medicham too. I'd love to see that picked, but I doubt they're going to pick a Pokemon as unpopular as Medicham, unfortunately. Then we have two of the attackers. One of the things we didn't see in the Celebration set from the original Celebration set is we didn't see a Dark Pokemon from the EX Team Rocket Returns era. Dark Pokemon came back at this time, and they were extremely meta-dominating. Dark Tyranitar is arguably the best deck in 2006, and Dark Dragonite is right up there as like a top 5 deck in both 2005 and 2006. So I think even 2007 there's something like, no, that's the Delta Species Dragonite at that point going around. So like these are like two of the most iconic attackers. They're both pretty popular Pokemon. I guess Dragonite's not an attacker, it's more of a support, but you get what I'm saying. Two very iconic cards. I would like to see them reprinted, and you know, you can give a little bit of accessibility because these are getting up there in value. If these weren't regular rares, they would be very, very high. Then we have a real winner here, Holon Transceiver. If there's like any card on this entire list that needs to be printed in the set, it is Holon Transceiver. Infamous for being one of the most expensive trainer cards ever printed. It is a huge gatekeeper for the 2006 format, 2007 format, because it is incredibly expensive. As you can see the price on the side, and this is a card that you will play 4 of in most decks of these eras. Not every deck, but most deck will play 4 of these, so it's incredibly gatekeepy. And really this is just a huge barrier breakdown. Similar to the way that Cleffa was printed in Celebrations, this would be a great way to help get people into these formats accessibly. So Holon Transceiver, probably the #1 card on here that needs to be printed. There's some cards that are more likely to be printed, but this is a card that needs to be printed. Then we have our Gold Star picks. I actually forgot a Gold Star. Let me just go fetch the third Gold Star I want to talk about here. Actually, there's 4 Gold Stars. 5 Gold Stars. Let's just line these up all at once, because I'll talk about Gold Stars in one go. Nope, not you. No, we're looking for Latias. Yes, wrong Lati. Plane. There we go. There's my big jet. There we are. So, this is definitely, I'd say if we're going to print a Gold Star in the next set, the best choice would be Rayquaza Gold Star. This is like the most expensive Gold Star, up there with Umbreon. Obviously, we have Umbreon covered, and it's actually playable too. It is played in a couple decks. It is very iconic. It is a very cool card. If they're gonna pick a Gold Star, this would definitely be my top pick. Then we have Latias Gold Star. This is arguably the most playable Gold Star. Playable in 2006 LBS deck, like I talked about with Lugia before. So very iconic of the era. Gold Stars sometimes have a hard time fitting in decks, but this one is in every single LBS deck, so it's very iconic. From a personal standpoint, this is a card I would love to own. It's a dream card. It's beautiful. one of the best looking cards ever printed. So one day this is on my bucket list to own. Celebrations reprint wouldn't be bad, but Rayquaza is probably a better pick just because of expense. Then we have Espeon. This is up there for like second or third most expensive Gold Star, competing with Rayquaza, because it's another one of these Pop 5 limited prints like Umbreon was, so a very hard card to get a hold of. This is another one that we printed just for collectors mainly, but it's not a bad pick in that regard. Then we have Mew, a very, very good Gold Star in 2008 and 2007, I believe. It was also used a little bit. So this is one of the more playable ones, but it's also Mew Gold Star, so it's a very popular Pokemon with a really good shiny, so definitely an iconic card to reprint. And we have Jolteon Gold Star. This is more of a playability one. Not everyone's favorite collectability, but it's still an evolution, so it's got something going for it, and it's, you know, at the end of the day, a fucking Gold Star, so it's got that going for it. This one's more for playability, though. It's Yellow Ray was a very good Pokepower back in the day, so if we're going to reprint one, this would also be a good pick. If I had to say a definitive one, just pick Rayquaza, but honestly, any of these four would make me happy. Probably Latias the most, Rayquaza the most, and then like Mew second most. Yeah, these are like tied. Rayquaza is probably the best pick though. Then we have some EXs. It gets really difficult because we picked Mew EX. Mew EX is probably the most iconic EX of the EX era, up there with Blaziken. 2006 and 2007 are a little bit more difficult because these EXs aren't like as long-lived as some of the prior ones, so didn't really have as much time to shine. Flygon EX, regardless, is a very, very good card in 2007, so a very iconic card, and it is a Delta species, so we get a Delta species representation in this, like we saw with Gardevoir in the original Celebration set. And we have Rayquaza. This is probably the most iconic Delta species EX, with its Rage Aura, just an incredible deck in 2007 and RSPK format. So RSPK is a format using all of the EX card, or all of the EX era cards that was in Japan. So this is probably the best pick, I'd say, is this Rayquaza, though obviously it does conflict with picking a Rayquaza Gold Star and a Rayquaza EX, which would be placed probably right next to each other in the set. So there's some conflicting there. Then we get on to the Diamond and Pearl era, my favorite era of the game. Starting off, we have Gardevoir and Gardevoir Level X. I wasn't really sure what to do for Level X's, truthfully, because the two most iconic Level X's are Luxray and Garchomp, which both were picked in last Celebrations, and frankly, God bless them for that. So I decided to pick the most iconic attacker of the Diamond and Pearl formats, which is Gardevoir, the best deck in 2008 and 2010. The Level X wasn't a huge part of that, though, which makes me wonder, like, it was in every Gardevoir deck, but it wasn't like the defining feature of said deck, so I'm really not sure, but it is a great Level X. It's still a very useful Level X. It was, like I said, it was played in every single Gardevoir deck because of its useful attributes. It just wasn't the part that made it great. What did make it great is Gardevoir from Secret Wonders, arguably the strongest Pokemon card ever printed, with Telepath, Psychic Lock. This is like a no-brainer to me. It's not like a super inaccessible card that no one can get, but it's a Gardevoir, and it is arguably the best card ever printed. So, up there with like Claydol, you know, DCE, Broken Time Space. Notice how a lot of these are all DP era cards, huh? You know, Shaman EX, Dedenne GX, like these kind of power levels, Gardevoir's up there. Then we move on to staples. This one's I'm a little bit biased about, believe it or not. The man with the Twitter account called Roseanne's Research wants a Roseanne's Research celebration card. Roseanne's Research is just starting to get a little bit hard to get. It's not a Rockets admin situation like with what Celebrations fixed, but it is a card that is difficult to get, so I wouldn't hate seeing a reprint in. You know, I'm a little biased. Then we have Call Energy. We did not see any special energy in the original Celebration set, if we want to just take a peek back at it real quick. There is no special energy, and that's a bit of a fallacy. Obviously, reprinting special energy is a bit hard because a lot of people don't really care about special energy, and it's kind of hard to make them care about special energy. Why is Claydol up here with the Gen 1 cards? That's really weird. But regardless, Call Energy and DCE are probably the two best special energies. You could also print something like Double Rainbow or Scramble Energy from the EX era. Those are ones I thought about as well. I really narrowed it down to Call just because of its inaccessibility. It'd be nice to see this printed. It would really help me build 2008 decks and 2009 decks that use it. I don't use it in 2010 in my decks, but In 2008 and 2009, you really need it, so I'd love to see this get a Celebrations reprint, make a lot of formats more accessible, because this is not a cheap card. Then we move on. This is a card that absolutely needs to be put in here. If we're talking like cards that need to be printed in here most, Holland Transceiver's number 1. Number 2 is Yuxi. Yuxi was not expensive for quite a long time. Its League print kept it down in value, as well as like it's not a great artwork, it's just a stock art, and it's not a popular Pokemon. But it is in like the top 5 best cards ever. Printed setup is the strongest Poke Power on a basic of all time. And Psychic Restore is incredible. This is a one-of in like every single deck from the time it was legal to the time it rotated, and then oftentimes it would be faced 2 or 3 copies in a deck to be its entire draw engine. You could not say enough good things about Yuxi, and it absolutely needs a printing. It is going up in price now. All the League promo printings are getting sold out. It is now like an $8 card. And it's in like every deck. I thank God every day that I got into 2010 as early as I did, which even then I still wasn't early. I was still paying inflation prices from the pandemic, but I got in before Yuxis became a legitimate problem like they are now. And tying with that, you know, the best Pokemon on a basic of the entire Diamond and Pearl era also comes with one of the best level X's of the era. If we're going to pick a single level X, I'd pick Yuxi. And I'd say for the Celebration's 30th anniversary, it'd be a good idea just to print Yuxi and Yuxi level X. Because why not? I think we can spare without Gardevoir level X, and frankly, none of the other level X's really stand out as much as Yuxi or Gardevoir, really, for the best level X's. You know, you have one like Empoleon that saw a lot of play. Blaziken is a really good one. You know, Mesprit and Azelf both stand out as well, but nothing more than Yuxi with its powerful trade-off and Zen Blade. Incredible card. And it's also another one that's really, really expensive, so love to see that printed. Then we have Gyarados, bit of a personal pick. It's one of the most iconic attackers in 2009, 2010, and up to its rotation in 2011, it was still good. This card just does so much right with its Tail Revenge attack. Arguably even got better in 2011. Once Triumphant came out and gave it Junk Arm, it just probably got even better than what it was in prior formats. So, one of the most iconic attackers of all time in the history of the game. Wouldn't hate seeing a reprint of this, though it's not a card that's like super inaccessible. Then we have another card. This is another inaccessible card. I wanted to pick a Pokemon SP. SP is one of my favorite mechanics in the history of the TCG. Unfortunately, if I picked Dustox G, Nintendo's lawyers would be at my door with guns and with Molotov cocktails in my backyard. So I decided to go and restrict myself and pick Toxicroak G, which is the most inaccessible Pokemon SP that is not a level X. It's like a $25 basic, which is ridiculous, and it's like a one-of in every single SP deck. So, this would be a great card to print. It's very iconic of the SP Pokemon. Really, when you look at SP, you know, you think of like the main attackers like Blaziken and Crobat, or main support, I guess, Crobat. But none are like less gettable nowadays than Toxicroak G, so I'd love to see a reprint of this. Then we have Flygon level X. When I was thinking, I didn't think this was like the most iconic level X ever, but in terms of like, you know, probably like 4th place for most iconic level X, I think this is a fine spot to take. It's one of my favorite level X's of all time. Wind Erosion and Extreme Attack, both incredible, and it levels up for one of the best Stage 2s printed in the entire Diamond and Pearl era. So this is a card I could definitely see getting a spot just because it was very good in 2009 and 2010. Very iconic card of the time. Super playable. Yeah, it's really got all the things going for it. Yeah, if we're going to pick a level X pick that's not Yuxi, I'd probably pick this. I'd still prefer Yuxi level X, though. Then we have Spiritomb. This is a card that, once again, is not inaccessible. It's still very cheap. These prices are misleading. You can get the League promos for like $2 a piece, though they are going up. So, again, in 3 years, this might completely change, and it might start to being a $5 card. It is a 4-of in a lot of 2010 decks, and a 2 to 3 of in a lot of decks, and a 1 of in... You should play one Spiritomb in every Evolution deck in 2010. It is the best starting Pokemon ever printed, right up there with Sableye. And, well, Sableye might be a pick just because it got things banned. I don't think Sableye is, like, nearly as splashable as Spiritomb. It's really only used in like Gyarados and some SP lock decks the time. Much less so, you see some people trying to make Sableye variants work, but they're just worse than Spiritomb, because if your opponent opens up a Spiritomb against your Sableye, they have the advantage. So, one of the best cards ever printed, super iconic of the era. Do I see it getting picked? Probably not. Then we have Pokemon Collector. This is another card like Rocket's Admin that gets a little bit out of control due to its pricing. It is like a $6 supporter, which is ridiculous. But it's like a 4 of in every 2011, 2012 deck. Not every 2012 deck. Every 2011 deck, those plays 4 of these. It is like a 4 of in every single 2011 format. It's played in 2010 as a 4 of in like Gyarados, as a 2 of in a lot of SP decks. You do see some bad old lists playing it in like evolution decks, which I would not recommend. Roseanne's is better. If you can search any kind of basic energy in your deck, you should be playing 4 Roseannes instead of collectors. But it is still one of the best supporter cards ever printed. Very expensive card. Would love to see a reprint of this. I think this has some collector value too. It's one of the last cards to ever feature Pichu, so I think there's some appeal there. And it's a very cool artwork, so very nice card. This is definitely like probably top 5 cards I'd like to see printed. Then we have Vileplume. Oh boy, I love Vileplume. The iconic trainer-locking fiend, enemy of all except the one using it. I love Vileplume. Very iconic and playable card from the HeartGold SoulSilver era. One of the best Stage 2s possibly ever printed. I compare this with the Vileplume from Ancient Origins. Well, Vileplume from Ancient Origins was also very, very good. It really only lived off the back of Force of Giant Plants, whereas this Vileplume was good separately. And part of that has to do with the fact that our good friend Spiritomb was around at the time. But even after Spiritomb rotated, this card continued to make Tier 1 decks. We saw the Truth, obviously, at 2011 Worlds be really good, and in HeartGold SoulSilver Noble Victories format, we saw Chandelure adopt Vileplume and become one of the nastiest decks of all time. So, really strong card and a personal favorite, but do I see it getting picked? Probably not. Then we have my 2 Prime picks. I was not very happy with that Donphan Prime last time. Is Donphan Prime one of the better Primes? Certainly. Though I think Donphan Prime is at its best a Tier 2 card. It never really had a Tier 1 deck. Obviously it was played in the Truth, which was kind of a rogue at the time, kind of Tier 2 in retrospect, but really cool. And it featured in, some speed decks throughout 2010, 2011, featured in Stage 1s, but it wasn't really a very Tier 1 deck. That changes with the Yanmega, which is arguably the single best Prime of them all. A very, very, very good card. And very iconic of the 2011 era. Starting to get up there. Primes are getting price gouged because, of course, collectors cannot be happy until they have ruined literally everything. So Primes are starting to become out of range for buying. But this is one of 2 Primes you should pick if you're going to pick a Prime for the next set. And Magnezone, easily the other most iconic Prime along with Yanmega. These 2 partnered up. And Magnezone and Yanmega each got up to their own bad deeds in their own decks, but why not just put the 2 best Primes together? It's not like Yanmega's attacks cost anything, right? So the other most iconic Prime of the time, and the deck it was featured in was called Prime Time. So there you go. And another staple card, one of the least accessible cards. These prices don't look too bad, $3 a copy, but then you realize it's 4 of in every single aggressive deck from the time it was printed till the time it rotated. It was in every single aggressive deck. If you're not playing an item lock strategy with Vileplume, you're playing like 4 of these. It is one of the best trainer/item cards ever printed, and I do think it deserves a spot for sure. Another like top 5 cards I want to see printed. A lot of the cards I want to see printed are staples because deck building is scary. So print some staples. This is the big one. Oh boy. Probably Celebration's biggest miss is not including Tropical Beach, and I understand why they would not want to do it, but it is a problem. They have not reprinted Tropical Beach yet, and it has been 12 years since it has been printed. It is one of the most expensive, expanded legal cards. It is absolutely ridiculous, and it is incredibly playable. People who play the 2011 Worlds and 2011 HeartGold SoulSilver Noble Victories, and 2012 and 2013 and 2014 and 2015, all of these formats it was playable in, we have to use these, like, I don't think it was playable in 2015 Worlds, actually. We have to use, like, fake copies, World Championship copies, or we have to proxy it out because this card is so expensive. This is arguably the most deserving card of a reprint. Really needs it. Next up we have Terrakion. I do believe that we could probably skip the black and white full arts if we do a Celebrations 2, due to them being very over-represented in the first Celebrations. What I mean by that is that there's only 9 black and white full arts, and 2 of them were printed in Celebrations, which is kind of insane in a way. And it's even kind of crazier that it printed as full art in the first place. They could have just printed the regular prints and people would have been much less happy, but I'm surprised they printed full arts. Regardless, if they're going to print a full art, Terrakion is definitely the next best one. I do really like Virizion. It was playable for about 3 months. I do really like Cobalion. It was really playable for like 3 months, and in a later deck, like 2 years down the line. And Tornadus is also a little bit playable. Terrakion's definitely like the most playable besides Reshiram and Zekrom. So if you're going to pick a black and white full art, this would be the one. But mainly, if we're going to do a black and white full art, this is not the same kind of full art, obviously. I think N got skipped. Rocket's Admin was a really good pick, but I think it would have been even better to have both N and Rocket's Admin, though they do the same effect, so I can understand why they wouldn't want to do that. N is the very first full art supporter card. It is one of the most iconic supporters in the history of the game. You're not going to find many people who hate the card N. People who hate the card N are people who like playing hyper aggro decks and don't like thinking about things. N is a great card. The full art is super iconic. It's very expensive nowadays. I think it would be very good to represent this in Celebrations 2 as the first full art supporter and one of the most iconic supporters in the history of the game. Then we have Darkrai. In Celebrations we had Mewtwo, and when it comes to the 2 like EXs that I think of the most when it comes to black and white, it's Darkrai and Mewtwo. Part of that has to be with the fact that I was playing in like 2012, not like with good decks, but with decks. And those 2 were the very best EXs. You get a few other ones later on, Keldeo, Rayquaza, Black Kyurem, and then you get to the Plasma ones, those have their own notoriety. But when it comes to like the regular EXs in year 1, I don't believe there's any more iconic than Darkrai and Mewtwo is already printed, so the other one would be Darkrai then. Darkrai was really good. Unlike Mewtwo kind of phased off in its later life as more EXs like could compete. Darkrai really, even just as a support, was always good. And even expanded nowadays. If you're playing a dark deck, you're probably playing Darkrai. Then we have Garbotox and Garbodor. Not a collector pick in the slightest, because collectors don't like Garbodor, but it is one of the most iconic abilities in the history of the game. This and its other rendition, which we'll get to, believe me, we have both Garbodors here, are easily like the most playable like Psychic type stage 1 probably ever. Just a really, really strong, I know it's a very specific thing, but regardless, this saw years of dominance in the TCG, would later come back in 2016 to cause even more years of dominance. The only argument for not printing Garbotox and Garbodor is because the other print was more iconic than this print. Then we have Keldeo. I did mention it earlier. If you're talking about iconic EXs of the black and white era, Keldeo definitely comes up. It is the World's 2015 winning deck and a very iconic deck with Keldeo Blastoise throughout 2013 and 2014. I do think in 2014 it's not a great pick as a deck, to be honest. Even the Black Kyurem variant, just very susceptible to like Virizion Genesect Gusting, but and Ability Lock Garbodor, which is everywhere then. But it's still a very iconic deck and a very iconic EX card. So, maybe for Celebrations 3 when they print Darkrai in the next one. Then we have Computer Search. Computer Search definitely needs a reprint, either Computer Search or Dowsing Machine, although I did put Item Finder up at the top like we saw earlier. Item Finder is essentially like Dowsing Machine, so is Junk Arm, so it's kind of like, you don't really want to triple down on the same niche. Computer Search is a card that absolutely needs a reprint. A-Specs were very, very good, and I do believe that in Celebrations 2 we should see an A-Spec of some kind. Really, Computer Search and Dowsing Machine are the only ones that make an argument for that spot. You obviously have some very iconic ones like G-Booster and Life Dew, but they weren't as playable as Computer Search and Dowsing Machine because they weren't as splashable. Then we have Deoxys EX. I decided to pick 2 Plasma EXs because we didn't see any Plasma representation in the original Celebration, so I picked the 2 most iconic ones. And for my money, Deoxys is definitely up there for the most iconic EX of the Plasma variety. Coming from the Plasma archetype, this was the main backbone of all those decks being played in 3 or 4 copies to boost their damage. And also just a great attacker against like Mewtwo EX, if you could see that running around on the ladder still at the time. It was really, really good. Yeah, Deoxys is certainly one of the most iconic EXs from this time, and certainly one of the most iconic Plasma cards. And the other one that comes to mind in that regard is Genesect. Verizon Genesect was like the best deck in 2014. I think it's like tied for best deck with Yveltal Garb, because Yveltal Garb actually has a good matchup against it. But, plus there's like Flareon everywhere if you want to beat this. Regardless, this card is very, very good. Format defining. Even in like before Lysander came out, people were playing this in their decks just a gust with Plasma decks. You really don't get like that much more iconic as a Plasma card than Genesect and Deoxys, so I'd like to see one of them represented in the next set. Frankly, I talked about all these EXs just now, like Darkrai and Keldeo, Deoxys, and Genesect. You could probably just do one EX from the whole Black and White era and just have it be a Plasma card. And, you know, that's getting the EX representation and that's getting the Plasma representation of the Black and White era. So, yeah. If I were to pick one, I think it would be Genesect. Deoxys is also a really good choice, though. Then we have Seismitoad. This is a card I do not like at all, but it was obviously very format-defining for years on end. Basically, from the time it came out to the time it rotated, it was making the game less fun for everyone. I don't hate item lock. I do just think the ease of this item lock makes it basically impossible to play anything but like Night March in this format, which is funny. So you end up with like Night March versus Seismitoad for the entirety of like 2015, 2016 being like half of the meta. And, you know, other decks like weave in and here and there, but, you know, it's still a very iconic card. I'm glad I didn't play when the time it was in its heyday, frankly. I skipped about 2 years then, thank God. I do like Seismitoad as a Pokemon, though, so I wouldn't hate seeing this just because I really like Seismitoad as a, Pokemon itself. Yeah. I didn't put the Night March here, by the way, and the reason I didn't put a Night Marcher here is because, realistically, it is a regular, common card, and I think that unless we're going to have an expanded celebration set, which is featuring lots of, let's just say something like 70 cards or something like that, I really don't think you need to represent a Night Marcher in here. Though it is very iconic, I'd rather something like Battle Compressor even. Speaking of iconic trainer cards, I hope this transition works well, from the XY era. Nope, it didn't. We have Mega Manectric. This is just a Mega choice. I don't think we need to rep a Mega, frankly. We got a Mega Rayquaza last time. Maybe we could rep Primal Groudon so you get a Primal, but that card wasn't super good, where Mega Manectric was definitely a better, more played card. But I just don't think we need a Mega rep again, but if we had one, this is one I'd probably pick. There we go. Speaking of iconic trainer cards from the X and Y era, along the same lines as Battle Compressor, I do think that the one who needs a reprint the most is Versus Seeker. Look at these goddamn prices over here. Versus Seeker is out of control. It needs a reprint so bad. I would love it to come back to standards, frankly. Standard formats are just better with formats in modern formats in general are just better with Versus Seeker around. It just makes decks able to tech different options and use them well. You see a lot more creativity in building, and you see the prominence of things like Item Lock actually able to take a hold when people aren't devoting more slots of their deck to using staple supporters. Instead of running 4 boss, they might run only 2 boss. So then when you item lock them, you have a legitimate chance, item lock plus hand disruption, you have a legitimate chance of sticking the item lock more, which is a very healthy interaction. I'd like to see Versus Seeker come back alongside good item lock. No, Banette, the EX does not count. That card is trash because it's stage 1, and you can't play stage 1s to do 30 damage when people play 30 items on the first turn of the game in the modern format. We need to see something like Seismitoad again, where it's a basic item lock, but preferably not a 2-prizer, I'd say, nowadays. So with Versus Seeker, it's a 4 of in every deck for the entire time it was printed until the entire time it rotates. If you're not playing an item lock deck, you're playing Versus Seeker. And even the item lock decks, the one-sided locks would Seismitoad would definitely play it. It's just the two-sided locks using something there was the Vileplume. We showed this one earlier. There's basically an exact reprint of this that locked both trainers, both items from each player during their turn, during the XY era. So if you're playing a deck like that, you wouldn't play Versus Seeker, but every other deck's playing 3 or 4, because it is, the best item ever printed, up there with, Ultra Ball, and, Battle Compressor, you know, these are like the best items ever. Yeah, Quick Ball, you know, things like that. Scoop Up Net. Yeah, Versus Seeker is really, really good. And it's getting out of control in the market. For the sake of building retro decks, this is actually a really bad thing because I build a lot of eras. You know, 2017 Nats, for instance. Every single deck plays like 3 or 4 of these, and it's getting a little bit tough. Every single deck plays Tidgewai, Dusty Plume. Yeah, please reprint this, either in Standard or in a Celebration set. This card really needs a reprint. Then we have Shaman EX, what I'm actually surprised was skipped for the original Celebration set. For those who didn't know, Shaman EX is probably the most iconic EX from the entire XY era. It was played as a like 2 to 4 of in like every single deck. Even single prize decks had to play this because it was so good. Setup allows you to draw until you have 6 in hand. You know, we saw Yuxi back in the day being thrown as a 1 of in like every deck, and I talked about that earlier. This Shaman is just was ironically played more than Yuxi because Yuxi was in the older era where it's less burnable. And the way I mean that is like Shaman, you can play multiple setups in turn and draw like 18 cards easily because of things like Ultra Ball, Sycamore, you know, Battle Compressor, like these cards that are just burning from your hand. Whereas in the Diamond and Pearl era, yes, we saw some burnable items like Pokédrawer Plus and the like, but a lot of the cards were very, you know, you kind of just shuffled cards back into your deck with Claydol over and over, or built up a hand to give you more options. Where the X and Y era is more turn and burn, thoughtless, just burning all your resources and hoping it works out in the end. Shaman EX is definitely the most iconic EX from the XY era. It's not too expensive right now, though. I'm going to let you Shaman fans know that this card's probably going to go up over time. I'm buying copies now while I can for my Nats decks and for anything I just had to build for the XY era, just because it's going to go up. It's inevitable that it's a super playable card in a lot of decks, and yeah, for sure. Shaman EX, very good. And next up, if we want to get a break representation, there's only like 3 or so breaks that are really top tier. You know, if we want to talk about playable breaks, you have what, like, let's just, I mean, we can just look up break, right? That's probably easier. I know we have Greninja here, which I am obviously going to point out. For other playable breaks, I think this Crobat saw a bit of play, but it's regardless. Zoroark is probably the second best break, either second or third, probably third. Probably the third best break, really, really good card in a lot of different XY era formats and early Sun and Moon formats. And we see Trevenant break, which is probably the second best break, really, really good in the 2016 season when it still had its item locking under form with the base Trevenant from X and Y. I really need to build a Trevenant break deck now that I think about it. Like, man, it's like one of the few cool decks from X and Y. And Eradicate was a bit of a meme deck going around at the time, but not very good. Let's see. Delphox, another meme deck going around at the time. Talonflame, actually a pretty good one because the Talonflame is already good, so you could break it and get a fire weakness hit, so not bad card at all. Did see some play into like 2016, 2017. Yveltal break was pretty good. We saw this a bit. Wasn't like amazing, but it was pretty good because Yveltal was already good. And Xerneas break was also really good in some like fairy, just accelerate as much fairy deck energy into play and then just blow up whatever's in front of you decks. Those existed. Carbink was really good. This is one of my favorite ones. And then Bronzong was really good as well. If I had to give like top 5 decks, oh yeah, Mega, yeah. Yeah, and Mega and Starmie also saw some play. If I had to give like top 5 breaks, it's like Greninja, Trevenant, Zoroark, probably Bronzong and Carbink, right? I'd give those my top 5 breaks. Maybe Carbink's Talonflame instead of Carbink, but you know, if we're gonna give a break representation, I think there's nothing better than Greninja break. It's a popular Pokemon. Was played a lot. Greninja break was essentially played from the time it was printed till the time it rotated, especially because it got cards like Bursting Balloon in the set it was printed. It could actually stand up to Night March to some extent, whereas most other decks, single prize decks, would just get, you know, go down 3 prizes by the time they're even attacking against Night March. So yeah, Greninja break, iconic card, saw a ton of play, definitely like the deserved break pick, if any. And we have the second Garbotoxin. This is the Garbotoxin reprint in Breakpoint. Breakpoint was a really good set for competitive, besides the fact I hate Max Elixir. This card saw an unbelievable amount of play, even more than the first print, because it got its best friend, Trashalanche Garbodor, which is one of the best attackers ever printed, and it's because it splits from the same Trubbish line. You can play both Garbodors in your deck, and I say you could play both Garbodors. People did play both Garbodors. This was a very, very good combo. In the NAIC format, like 15 of the top 16 decks at like one tournament were like Garbodor based, because Garbodor is really good. Trashalanche is an absolutely insane attack for single energy. Garbotoxin is really good. Basically until the time this guy rotated, this was like a combo that people were playing because it was so good. And yeah, I think if you want to rep Garbodor as a celebration card, I would be plenty happy. Then we have the most iconic GX. With Tapu Lele moved to the side, what GX would best be to reprint in celebrations? There's no other more iconic GX than Zoroark GX. The most consistent, the most fast deck of the Sun and Moon era. I say deck, but it was in fact part of like 30 different decks. Zoroark was an engine that decks just applied, but it was also a great attacker due to its powerful Rite of Speeding, which could do 120 for a single attachment. This card just absolutely deserves a spot. Really, if you're talking about GX reps, Tapu Lele was probably number 1 on my list to get one when Celebrations came out. And then like Zoroark is just number 2 now, so Zoroark moved down the line. Yep, let's get a Zoroark rep. And we're to the tag teams, or to the very end here. I decided not to pick anything from Year 2 of Sun and Moon TCG. It's not that Year 2 just had no playable cards, just that none of them were, like, defining, like, era-changing cards. You know, in Year 2, we saw the Prism Stars, like, Ditto Prism was a very good card. And we saw, you know, some of the Ultra Beasts take off in Year 2. Things like Blacephalon were very good. Saw Alolan Ninetales, which was like the best card in the game for 3 months, but then it just disappeared entirely with tag teams. Yeah. So I picked 3 tag team cards, the 3 best tag teams to represent tag teams. The first one's Arceus Dalgapalkia, the enemy of all single prize decks, and people who enjoy playing the Pokemon trading card game for its complex thought. Arceus Dalgapalkia is the antithesis of all of that, and its ultimate ray is the master of 3-turn games where you don't have to think, just do the same thing you did the last 30 games in a row. So, yeah, do I like this card? Absolutely not. Is it, like, worth a pick? Probably. The other most prominent tag team, probably the most playable of them all, if I had to say, is Mewtwo Mew. The reason I say Mewtwo Mew is the most playable, it's kind of like Zoroark, where it's a splash ability. If you look at, like, any meta from, like, 2019, 2020, it's not just that one Mewtwo Mew deck was always good, it's that, like, half of the meta was different ways of playing Mewtwo Mew GX. Even the next tag team we'll talk about eventually just paired up with Mewtwo Mew GX, because Mewtwo Mew GX is just the best way to play tag teams. Because you can just use all of them in one. Why play anything else when you can just do all of it in this one card? Mewtwo Mew GX saw play with probably like 100 different variants between standard and expanded. I've played against Mewtwo Mew GX decks using Team Plasma cards, bro. This card's insane. Copies any attacks of GX and EX on the bench or discard pile. Probably the most broken ability printed on a GX Pokemon, and I say that just having moved on from trade. Like, this is so insane. Yeah, it won Worlds in 2019, and it remained a good card until the very moment it rotated, so yeah. And the last pick would be Pikachu and Zekrom. Definitely a little bit more iconic of a tag team GX just because it was the first one. Immediately saw play from the time it went into the format. It basically kicked out all Stage 2 decks from existing, because that's the tag team effect for you. Accelerate 3 energy into play, nuke something on the bench and the active at once, go ahead 3 prizes before your opponent even got the chance to set up. Yep, that's this deck's name and game. Yeah, this card was disgusting. Saw play for really like, it was really like tier 1, tier 2, basically up until its battle styles or so. When Rapid Strike Urshifu was printed, it started to finally dwindle off after being like a constant meta thing for the entire time it was legal up until then. So yeah, if we're talking about iconic for 3 tag teams, these are definitely the best picks. those are my choices for what I would do for a Celebrations 2. Do I think we're going to get the same formula twice? I don't think so. Honestly, they're probably going to change something up. Probably going to do it worse because I don't know how you could top Celebrations other than, like I said, doing Celebrations 2 where you just pick more cards to reprint. Really, you can't, like... They're probably just not going to do the format again. They're probably going to do something worse, like a Gen 1 reprint or something stupid like that again, like Evolutions. Yeah, don't do that, please. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed these picks, let me know in the comments what yours are, actually. I'd be very curious to know if I missed any cards that would be really, really iconic to print. Maybe you're just a collector, and maybe you just want your Charizard set, like every single card. Here, let me fill out the collector's celebration set real quick. Here, I'll fix this for you. My bad. 25th anniversary celebrations. This is the 30th ones. We need 30 cards. Here, I'll fill this out. The collector's edition of celebrations. Just, yep. Alrighty, yep, gotta have that one. Yep, gotta have that one. Love the stock art. Yes, very iconic, completely unplayable cards. Very nice. The one, like, playable Charizard from this time. Yep. Yep. Here we go. Yep. That's one we like. Yeah, we like that one too, and that one. Yeah, the Mega's probably iconic enough. Yeah, this one's good. Yeah, let's just see. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Actually, we'll put the rainbow versions in there. We're getting to higher rarities now. We gotta put like these guys in there instead of the regular prints. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, just like every single ugly rainbow rare card, shiny gold, AIDS. Yep. Oh yeah, bro. Every single rainbow one. Yep. Get in there. Ugliest cards known to man, throw them in. Okay, so guys, I made the collector's version of this pick. We'll add a Lugia for good measure, just because why not? Because, you know, collectors don't like anything but Lugia, Umbreon, Evolutions, and Charizard, so, and Gen 1 Pokemon in general. So let's just add a Lugia real quick if this thing will search. Doesn't look like it's going to search. So, yep, that's my collector's edition. If you want any more collector picks, let me know. I was thinking about including another 50 Charizards because there's clearly not enough love for Charizard in the TCG, so, you know, maybe we might as well just throw in more Gen 1 cards. This will also be a Gen 1 reprint set. And not only will it be a Gen 1 reprint, it'll be exactly base set reprint, no special quirks or anything. It'll just literally be base set, but like with a new symbol on it. Let me know if you guys like that. I'm also going to reprint Fossil and Jungle because, of course, the best sets ever with, like, complete stock art and CG backgrounds. Love those sets. Great sets. Yep. Greatest of all time. Super balanced competitive play that people loved. Absolutely great. Oh, yeah, Lugia. Let's add those two. Yeah, let's make it the collector edition real quick of Celebrations. Yep. Ooh, yeah, Lugia Legend. That was a good one. I can't wait to pull Lugia's leg in my Celebrations pack. Yep. Plasma Lugia, actually playable one, right? That was a Lugia that existed. Yep. Lugia GX. Yep. Put the rainbow. Gotta have it ugly as possible. Yep, gotta have all those ugly rainbows in there. Yep, okay. And we can go even higher. Can we get much higher? Umbreon, yep. Umbreon, gotta love Umbreon, yep. Gen 2, I pretended to play these games when I was younger. Yep, I love Gen 2 because it's not Gen 3. Gen 2, yep. Great cards. Yep, that's one. That's an Umbreon. That's also an Umbreon. Yep, that's an Umbreon. Yep. Yeah, we'll reprint these just for good measure. More rainbows. We need more rainbows. Moonbreon. Oh my god, I'm gonna sell my child for this mid alternate art. Let's go. Moonbreon. So sick. Yay. Okay, guys, I think this is pretty good. I think we have a good Celebrations reprint here. Let me know your picks in the comments down below. I was personally thinking that we needed a bit more Charizard, maybe a bit more Lugia. You know, Lugia kind of lacking. A few more Rainbow Rares, you know, everyone's favorite Rainbow Rares that were so popular that they had to phase them out because they literally couldn't keep the demand down for these Rainbow Rares. Especially in Japan, you know, everyone loves their Rainbow Rares. That's why they're on the discount shelf of every single store, of course. And stuck in people's collections eternally because nobody wants to trade for them. It's just a lie, bro. The government wants you to think Rainbow Rares are bad. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this Celebrations pick. Let me know your picks in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.